Hey guys, so I was listening to ATP podcast, and you guys are having that what I thought was an absolutely fascinating discussion about battery life and CPU usage and Overcast, and I couldn't help but think of my own situation with my own app, Skipcast. This is not trying to be some weird shameless plug here. I remembered as you, Marco, were talking about this, I was like, oh man, I remember doing all this stuff, and I figured if nothing else, maybe I could kind of toss my hat in the ring here as far as things that I've done in the past. The reason why I think this is useful is really two things. I think first is because it is a podcast application, so it's very similar to your own in terms of it's doing things like audio visualization and audio effects using Core Audio, and also, if nothing else, maybe this will give you some interesting numbers to compare with your own app. And to be perfectly honest, when you and Smith have your show, I'd be curious to know if you guys can actually kind of talk about performance monitoring a little bit. I think it'd be a really interesting show because our battery life doesn't seem to be getting better for most of the devices that we have. So anyway, what am I talking about here? Well, basically, when I have a battery task, this is the process I use. So I want to compare different features in Skipcast. And in particular, I want to compare when I'm using an audio visualizer or not using one, and then when I'm using Core Audio with an audio effect versus just using AV Player. So I wanted to see what the difference was. So basically, when I have something like that, I will take like a little task list like this, and I'll give myself two things to do, and then I'll give myself a playback like playbook on how I should be trying those different things. So in this particular case, then at 10 seconds, I'm going to play an item. Then at 20 seconds, I'm going to go to my player view. And then finally at 30 seconds, I'll stop. And I want to talk about this player view one in a second. But first, let me just kind of talk about this one. So what I'll do is from the run, I'll select the run itself. I'll then select a selection of time when I'm in a steady state. So maybe 5 seconds there. And then importantly, I'll select my second run, and then I'll actually move my slider so that I'm at the same relevant time that I had before, but now I'm selecting the other set of data. And then I'll basically just toggle between the two. And obviously, as you can see here, when I have a visualizer enabled, which is this run, I'm using a good bit more CPU, even over a short 5-second run, than I am when I don't have the visualizer enabled. Now, I should actually mention, for sake of completeness, I still have one visualizer running right here, but only updates every 5 seconds, as opposed to this one, which updates around 30 times a second. So yeah, so that's, I think, the first interesting thing there. Now, the reason why I like this as a technique is because I'm a new iOS developer and not very good at it. I actually discovered a bug this way. So because I wasn't super up to speed on how like run loops worked and core animation drawing routines, I didn't actually realize that when I left the view and went to a child view and a navigation controller based application, that the core animation loop was still running. And so this now just checks to make sure that between these two runs, when I change views, I'm actually using, in theory, the exact same amount of CPU. And in fact, we can see here that I am basically, which is good. This was not the case previously. I was actually using the same amount of CPU, whether I was looking at a visualization or not. Obviously, Overcast is different. You have that cool little display in more places, but for me, I only had it in one place, and it was a waste to have it showing other places. So I don't know, I find that quite useful. The second thing I wanted to take a look at then, and again, this is more just for your own sake to see like differences in CPU, I wanted to get an idea of when I had my skip silence filter running or not. And so in this run then, at 10 seconds, I'm basically having no skip silence, and at 20 seconds, I enable it. And so I should just be able to select a group of time here, maybe like 6 seconds. And I should see here that I'm using about 60 milliseconds of CPU over that 6 seconds. And then when I enable it, you can actually see the little controller view pop up right there. If I select the same amount of 6 seconds, I should see more CPU being used, and I certainly am. I went from 60 milliseconds to basically 100 milliseconds. So this is definitely using more CPU when I have the visualizer enabled. Finally, though, I did want to do a comparison between, well, what does AV Player do, right? So even though my users can use Core Audio for most playback, if I'm doing streaming or video playback, I will use AV Player. So I can actually easily select that in the app. And so if I go to where I had my first steady state, I can actually do a nice comparison between these two. Whoops. So, let's say I'll grab 7 seconds from this one and 7 seconds from this one. I should actually be able to see here that all things told, Core Audio is actually a little bit more efficient than AV Player is. I don't know exactly what it is. Maybe it's just my implementation, but yeah, it seems like this is actually a little bit better. So I don't know. That's personally what I do. I know it's not perfect. I know I'm not actually, as far as I know, like looking at peak amount of CPU usage, but in my book, if I'm using the CPU at all, I've already lost, right? So if I'm doing it, I'd better well have a damn good reason for doing so, something that benefits the user. And so not only has this technique of kind of running like a little script been beneficial for making sure I'm kind of frugal like that, it's also helped me catch some bugs like it did with this core animation one right here. So I don't know. Hopefully this is useful. Love the show as always. And honestly, again, hopefully you guys will be able to cover some of your follow-ups, some of the gains that you've had in a future episode. So anyway, keep up the great work, and I don't know, thanks for watching.